felt like a duck out of water. I was a preacher, and I was a preacher. And they started talking back and forth, and it just kind of triggered something in me that I needed to get more involved in, not politics. I despise politics, but my country, and specifically the history of my country. We don't teach these kids the depth of our history. And so I jumped into the Constitution and got everything that I could. And I put together this thing. Y'all remember we did it here back in the back. And it was like 8 weeks long or something like that. We went through all 28 principles of the Constitution, and it took forever, and y'all were faithful to come to that. And I had a pastor ask me, he said, could you boil that down to one night? And yeah, I was like, what? And he said, yeah, if you can get all that sifted down to one night, I'll have you come and present it. And that was Darrell Shealy up at Bay Lake. And so I squeezed and evaporated and condensed, and this is what you're going to see tonight. Our Constitution is a genius document. It's not inspired like the Bible, but it is absolutely genius. And it's based on 28 very specific principles. Every one of these principles was in existence in 1787. Every one of them. Nobody was using them. Nobody in the world. And so our founders, who were readers, they didn't have phones and computers. They read books. And they read some good guys. I'm going to give you some information on that shortly. And so what this is just sort of a walk down history lane. Where did these guys get this stuff? What did we look like as a nation in 1787? And going back to 1607, which was Jamestown, the first permanent settlement on the North American continent. How did those people govern? You got to have some kind of government. What did they do? So anyway, that's what we're going to do tonight. Psalm 32, verse number 12, says simply this: blessed is the nation. He didn't say blessed is Israel. Blessed are the Jews. He said blessed is the nation. Whatever nation that is, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. Blessed is that nation. Now, okay. It says the remote has stopped. Anna will get this fixed. This is why I like my little remote, but it can't work with the computer back here. They don't like each other, apparently. All right, are we good? So all I need to do is just tap. Okay. All right. There were about 250, and these men were statesmen. They were highly, highly educated men. And these gentlemen were giants intellectually in the United States, which wasn't the United States at that time. And that to get their ideas to the general public, they had to write. They had to know how to write. They knew, like the Federalist Papers. If you've ever read the Federalist Papers, those appeared in newsprint all over the eastern part of the country anyway. And these men, they were intellectuals. They were highly educated men. And their speeches and their letters, they wrote letters, printed them in newspapers. Pastors preached on this subject constantly. There was a group of preachers called the Black Robe Brigade. Have you ever heard of the Black Robe Brigade? It was a bunch of preachers that they carried their muskets to church and put them up in the corner. And when they heard the alarm, if there was some kind of an attack on the village or the city, boom, they grabbed that rifle and they were gone. So from the get-go, pastors have been involved in securing the freedom of the country. And the writings and the speeches, they defined America before it was America. All right, they understood there were some principles that they needed to pull together to create a type of government and just a civil environment that existed nowhere. It certainly didn't exist in Europe, because Europe was run by kings and monarchs and dictators, and we didn't want that again. We wanted something new. And so a lot of what these men wrote and spoke and represented back in those days gave rise to the laws that we just assumed that, I mean, we've been in the United States for what, 242, 243 years. And so the laws that we obey and the laws that are on the books, we just think, well, there's always been, and it hasn't. It was brand new, actually, as far as a form of government was concerned, because nobody was doing this in the 1700s. The purpose of the founders, this is, I think, kind of a very important point right here. Our insistence on independence as a nation was never identified as some sort of a revolutionary, brand new, we've never heard of this kind of a government. That was not the case. Let me tell you what was new. What was new was the way England was doing things. They departed from biblical principles, and we just simply reset a government back to biblical principles. That's what the American Revolution was all about. And so rather than to dissolve, when you read about this in the Declaration of Independence, for instance, definition of to dissolve the political bands which have connected them, the colonists wanted to be disconnected from a wrong form of government and be reconnected to a proper form of government that was literally thousands of years old. Mankind had taken human government in the direction of man would make his own decisions, man would make his own choices, the king would rule and the dictator. And so we didn't like that. We didn't want to go in that direction. Of government back to the basic principles in the Bible. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, while never mentioning the name of God. Jesus is not mentioned. There's not one verse of Scripture quoted in either one of these documents. We know exactly who they were talking about. There was a general understanding, to give you an idea. The name the Lord God or something like that, Jehovah, is not mentioned in any of these documents. But if, in this crowd right here, in this group, if I were to say Jamie's wife, everybody here knew what I'm talking about? You understand, there was such a common knowledge of who nature's God was. And I think there was an assumption on the part of our founders that we're always going to be this kind of people. Well, they weren't right about that, because we're not that kind of people anymore. The Continental Congress, this is an amazing fact. It happened on September the 11th, 9/11, 1777. The Continental Congress ordered the import of 20,000 Bibles, because we didn't have 20,000 Bibles in the colonies, for U.S. troops. The use of the Bible, and here was part of the text. The use of the Bible is so universal and its importance so great that importation of types and paper, the committee recommends that Congress will order the Committee of Commerce to import 20,000 Bibles from Holland, Scotland, or elsewhere into the different parts of the states of the Union. It was so resolved, said Committee of Commerce to import 20,000 copies of the Bible. They did. We imported 20,000 copies of the Bible, and they were given to our military men throughout the country, which I think was a brilliant move. Now, that would even be illegal today. See, what we did then, this would be illegal today.
Did we have 20,000 troops
Yes.
at that time?
Yes. Now, probably you young people, and perhaps even some of you adults, have not heard the term federalism. But here's what we're talking about. American federalism is unique in the history of human government. And I'm telling you, nothing like what we have existed, even though the principal parts existed. It's like there was a box of parts in a shop somewhere that had been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and then somebody comes along and puts together a 427 engine out of it. The parts were there, nobody was using it, and then drop it into a frame, and somebody got the car going. But all the component parts had been in existence for centuries. And here is my understanding from a lot of research that God was simply waiting for a biblically educated people to show this box of parts to. Nothing like this existed. Nowhere. And so here come the colonists over here, and they didn't come to escape taxation without representation. That was not, of the 27 grievances that we wrote in the Declaration of Independence against King James III of England, taxation without representation was number 17. So that was not the primary purpose. The primary purpose was quit telling us who and how we have to worship. We want the freedom to worship according to our own dictates and our own consciences as directed by the Bible. And so there was a deep spiritual understanding of these people when they came over here. And so I think he reserved these blessings for a people who would not misuse them. And we have begun to do that. But the generations, they were the right people. Now, he reserved freedom to people who understood that, and you young people understand that the government does not give you your liberty. God has granted the human species liberty and freedoms, and all government is to do is to act like a junkyard dog. Government should be the watchdog to guard our God-given liberties, but over the last few generations, government has begun to believe that itself is the grantor of liberties and freedoms, and that is not the case at all. The capacity for self-government. This is key. If a people do not govern themselves, you cannot have the kind of system that to have. If people refuse to govern their own behavior, you've got to have a dictator to tell them what to do. And so this is one of the key factors involved in this matter of self-government. James Madison, who was one of the founding fathers, wrote this about this matter of self-government. It is evident that no other form would be reconcilable with the genius of the people of America, with the fundamental principles of the Revolution, or with that honorable determination which animates every votary of freedom to rest all our political experiments on the capacity for self-government. In other words, do the right thing without government telling you to do the right thing. I've told kids for years, maturity is not when you start to shave or get your driver's license. Maturity is when you can make sound decisions without supervision. When you can do the right thing without being told what to do, you're mature. And the same thing is true of a nation. When citizens in a town decide, I'm not going to steal, I'm not going to rob, I'm not going to kill because it's the wrong thing to do. You don't need a king to tell you not to do that. That's innate. That's just part of the system of man to know not to do those things. Now, did you know that George Washington was not our first president? Y'all, it's true. They say the truth. And here's the deal. We had the Articles of Confederation. This was, I suppose you could say, our first Constitution. It was very loose. I mean, it was just one of these, well, to give you an idea, the Articles of Confederation requested the colonies to send tax money into the, yeah, and if you have some, would you, well, there have been some changes, as you can tell, through the years. But here are our first 8 presidents. There was a gentleman, you want an interesting study of a great patriotic family, study the Hanson family. John Hanson was the first president of the Continental Congress. And they had one term, 1 year. Yeah, exactly. And so he was our president from 81 to 82. Of course, we're talking about the 1700s. Then there was Elias Boudinot. Following President Boudinot was Thomas Mifflin. Richard Henry Lee, John Hancock, Nathan Gorman, Arthur St. Clair, Cyrus Griffin, and number 9, George Washington. Now, why do we say that George Washington was the first president of the United States? He was the first constitutionally elected president, or the first popularly elected president. These other 8 guys were elected by the Continental Congress to serve as president of the Continental Congress, which in essence was president of the country, but George was the first one that was elected as a whole. And so a lot of folks are surprised about that. Now, the United States was born on March the 1st, 1781 at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. That was when the vote was taken, and that's when we began to operate as a country. Our first national document was the Articles of Confederation, and Mr. Hanson was the president under these articles, and they were so loose it was called a League of Friendship. And we had our own, each colony had its own currency. Each colony had its own contracts for trade with Europe, specifically Great Britain. And so we were competing. We were 13 different countries, what it turned out to be. And we were competing against each other for trade rights and things like that. And so what had happened was, the original states, with the exception of Rhode Island. Anybody in here from Rhode Island? Okay. They appointed 70 men to what we know now as the Federal Convention in the State House in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And they called this meeting, it was hot, oh my word, it was hot. There was a cobblestone street in front of State House, and when wagons would rumble, it would make a whole lot of noise, and the U.S. Army brought in, or the military brought in dirt, and they paved those cobblestones with dirt so those wagons wouldn't rumble so loud, and because they needed to get this thing done. And the original purpose for the calling of this meeting was not a constitution. Nobody even thought of doing that. They were trying to stitch up and put more teeth in the Articles of Confederation. They were trying to strengthen that because things just weren't working real well. And so this thing began on May the 14th, 1787. Delegates from 2 states showed up. Well, 2 colonies, I suppose you'd say. There weren't even enough members there to get a quorum. And so I think it was for 9 days they met, and they would dismiss. They couldn't do anything. And so on May the 25th, 1787, 7 states, 5 other states finally showed up. And so, we finally have a quorum to get some stuff done. And as they began to hammer this thing out, it became very obvious this can't be fixed. There are some things that you just can't fix, especially if you want an expanding, growing nation. This was just not going to work. And so by mid-June of that year, a new document started to be framed. They started hammering this thing out. And basically nobody agreed on anything. There were some that wanted 3 presidents, some wanted 7 presidents, some wanted 1. So it was a zoo for a while. As a matter of fact, this convention dismissed for a period of time because nobody could get along. And so they dismissed. They didn't leave the area. They dismissed, and they went to churches in the area. And when they finally got together, as old Benjamin Franklin said, guys, if we're going to get anything done, we need to open these sessions with a prayer every morning. And old Benjamin Franklin is the one that got that started. And 55 delegates attended the Constitutional Convention as we know it now. 39 of these finally signed it. 3 attendees did not sign the Constitution. All right? I know who they were. There was a gentleman by the name of Elbridge Gerry from Massachusetts. George Mason and Edmund Jennings Randolph. These 2 brethren were from Virginia, and they refused to sign it because what they thought was going to happen was we're establishing another monarchy here. They're trying to get this strong national government, and we just moved out of that. We don't want any more of that. And so they were a little suspicious, hence they did not sign this new document. And so the delegates ranged in age from a young man by the name of Jonathan Dayton, who was 26 years old, 26, to the old man Benjamin Franklin, who was 81, and everybody was in between those two benchmarks right there. So from May the 24th to September the 18th, that's I think 124 days, in 1787, the greatest document of human government ever written was produced by these men, and I mean that. There's nothing like this in the world. That's why people risk their lives to come here, because they want to be governed by the principles of that document. And it just has never happened before. Now, 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. One of the foundations of our founders is the government will guard your liberties. And that was brand new. I mean, that was radical stuff. What do you mean you're going to guard our liberties? God has given you your liberties. Now, in England, it wasn't that way. The king told you what you would do. You worked for the king. They had the feudal system over there, and everybody worked for the king. You made all your money. You gave most of it to the king. You kept a little bit to buy potatoes and onions, and over the period of years, that's just the way England worked. That's the way Europe worked. Crowned heads ruled England. People had just been beaten into submission. But there were some people that were sick of that. They got tired of it. And by the way, a lot of these were your Baptist forefathers. They had and we're not into that particular aspect of it, but had it not been for early Baptists, this country would more than likely not be founded the way it was. And there's a tremendous history behind that. So the creation, according to John Adams, of the United States was the greatest single effort of national deliberation that the world has ever seen. In this 124-day period, the foundation of the country was hammered out on the anvil of some pretty hot debate. I mean, it got rank in the federal house as these guys were arguing these points. And colonists, 180 years, from 1607 to 1787, to collect these principles of government and weld them together into a usable system of governance. So for 180 years, we weren't sure what we wanted to do, and so we finally put this together that we know as a Constitution. And they searched well. They did their due diligence, because the United States, is the oldest constitutional republic in the world. Did you know that? We're not the oldest nation in the world, but we're the oldest constitutional republic. As a matter of fact, we were the first constitutional. Well, let me put it this way. We were the first Christian republic in the history of the world. We were founded on the basis, basically, of the laws in the Old Testament. And I'll give you some background on that here pretty shortly. Now, the Dominican Republic, give you an idea of how blessed we are. The Dominican Republic holds the world record with 32 constitutions through the years. They'll have a coup, they'll kick their president out, they'll throw another one in, write a constitution, throw him out, Venezuela, 26. Haiti has had 24. Ecuador has had 20. El Salvador has had 14. Nicaragua, 14. Honduras, 14. Colombia, 6 to 10, depending on whose book you read. And so we, however, on the other hand, we got one. So apparently, for a document to survive the way this document has survived, there must be really strong reasons for its existence. And God has put His hands around this country because it's right here, because of the nature of the documents, specifically our two documents that we're founded on.
Those are all monarchies, aren't they?
Pardon?
They're all monarchies. They're ruled by one family.
Or, well, not necessarily a family, but either an individual or a powerful committee of individuals. socialist or communist. Now, the University of Houston, a number of years ago, their political science professors gathered together 15,000 quotes from the founders that were significant in the development of the nation. They narrowed this thing down to 3,150 quotes. Had a really significant impact on the development and the founding of the country. Here's what they discovered. You'll find this interesting. The project took 10 years to complete. The three men, most quoted by our founders, these 150 or 250 founders, these three men, Blackstone, Montesquieu, and John Locke. Have you heard of those guys? These three men were quoted more frequently than any other writer in history. However, we're not through yet. The Bible was quoted 4 times more often than Montesquieu. It was quoted 12 times more often than Blackstone. It was quoted 16 times more often than the great English jurisprudence genius, John Locke. And these are the 3 most quoted men, yet the Bible was quoted in these founding, not founding documents, but the writings of the founders. This is what they have discovered. And 34% of all the quotes were from Scripture that these men wrote that were significant in the founding of the country, plus an additional 60% were from men using the Bible to arrive at their conclusions. Not necessarily a quote of a verse, but saying, this is what I have understood the Bible to teach. And so are we a republic? We're not a democracy. Don't let anybody tell you that we're a constitutional republic. Are we founded on principles of the Bible? Yes. Yes. You can't deny this. I'm sorry. If a liberal doesn't like it, oh well. This is just incontrovertible. Now, the purpose of the Constitution, it was written to perpetuate a Christian order of government, period. Now, if you try, and it is one of the reasons that liberals hate the Constitution, many, because it takes power out of their hands, and they don't like that. And I'm not just saying Democrats. You can have liberal Republicans as well. There are just many, many politicians on local and national levels that do not like the fact that the Constitution shackles them. And that's exactly what it does. What are the first words of the Constitution of the country? We the people. Who? Did you know this is not a government document? This was a document that was written from the platform of the people to the government, and we are saying through our Constitution to the government, guys, let me tell you, this is how much you're going to be able to do, and this is how much you're not going to be able to do. So they work for us. I think they've maybe lost sight of we the people. So the question has got to be asked. Can you see that? I don't know how. Okay, yeah, it's bigger up there. Do we still have for self-government? Are we reaching a point in the country where we're going to have a law for everything? And that's the first. That's what the first. Something goes wrong. There ought to be a law. Well, Daniel's right. There probably is already. But can I ask you, why can't we just do the right thing without there being a law? Why can't we just know this is the wrong thing to do, therefore against the law, but it's the wrong thing to do? True, it's a big money maker, in essence is what it is. So, the world's first Christian republic, and basic human institutions that God established, and the first one in the Garden of Eden, family, the home. The second one, established in the book of Genesis, human government. And the third one, established in the New Testament, the New Testament church. Each of these three has a specific role to play in the development of humankind. All of these depend on us saving ourselves. Now, when we don't do that, in. For instance, in the book of Judges, which is a year period of dark ages in the Bible, 7 times in the book of Judges, 7, Israel would, they were in God's will and everything was going along, and then they'd fall off into idolatry. And the Lord would make a phone call. Okay, it's time to go over. Yeah, 7 times they did that. In other words, God saw to it that their behavior was controlled. Now, do you see, maybe in our country, what's going on here, that if people refuse to do the right thing and control their own behavior, government just swells up. And so that the very principle of self-government is the foundation for what we're doing here in the country. Does character matter? Have we lost our capacity for self-government in the home? What about in government? What about in church? Are we always looking for, are homes looking for the government to raise their kids? Yes. I mean, it's just like no one is responsible for their own behavior. There will be a law, Well, there already is. That law has been written in the heart of man by the very God of heaven. And so when where there's no vision, the people perish. The word vision means preaching. Perish means run wild. So where there's no preaching, run wild. People run wild. Can you see where that developed into our contemporary culture, where there is no preaching? Kids like this run wild. Adults like us run wild. And it's actually pretty obvious what has happened. So Israel forfeited the right to self-government. She abandoned these principles, and God sent an oppressor. Now, there's no country in the world that can oppress us and control us. How do you think the Lord's going to do that? I think He's going to use our own government. He's already using our own government to oppress the population because we're not behaving ourselves. People are taking guns and doing stupid stuff with them, and so what's the cry of the people? There ought to be a law. Well, there is. If people were law-abiding citizens, none of that would ever happen. We have the laws on the books that would prevent every one of these senseless, violent acts, but people don't care about law. There are people in the country they could care less about what's right and wrong legally. They're going to do what they want to do. You can pass all the laws you want to pass. And so what I'm seeing in the country is we are headed for control by the government because we have failed to control our own behavior in the home, in government, and in church. However, the government seems to do what it wants to do. I'm telling you, if everything that has been done, for instance, in the DOJ, in the last the local level, this is why I got convicted to get involved in this thing locally, because Daniel is exactly right. You can't change in Wauchula. It's just not going to happen. All right. To greater strides in technology than in the previous 5,000 years of human history. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Freedom in a written document. This is what the crowned heads of Europe thought was stupid. What? You're going to put this? Man, don't put anything in writing. Don't write this. Because there was nothing in written form in Europe. If the king had a bad pizza before he went that night, that was their lifestyle. This is the way they did it. They just speak and change law. And but this was guaranteed. Our freedoms were codified. They were written on paper with ink. And when that happened, it absolutely unleashed a flood. Any country could have done this. Country that people involved in this. But nuclear energy, we're the ones that developed that. Jet propulsion, we're the ones that have developed that. Freedom to worship according to the Bible, we're the ones that have championed that. Contract law, government law, business law, you're freer here in this country, at least you used to be, to build a business than anywhere else in the world. Science, communication, all of these really dynamic inventions and developments took place here. Why? Were our people any smarter? No. They were freer. All right? Now, freedom is an atmosphere. You say, well, does atmosphere really matter? Can you grow pineapples in Siberia? Does atmosphere matter? Atmosphere matters. And so in this atmosphere of freedom, people begin to feel, I have a dream. I'd like to develop that. And the government was like, well, go for it. Do it. Absolutely do it. And so this stuff started blowing up all over the country. Thank God for that. Now, do what? Yep. Is just the way God designed human beings to flourish. And when you stifle that, you stifle everything else. But now this was odd. When I began to look into these things, not very many of the resistant to it. No, we don't want that. And I was like, why? Well, there was an interesting answer. This is an actual photograph of an ancient colon. No, it's not. It's not what that is at all. It was not a popular tune that founders and leaders were beginning to preach about this self-government. And the reason was they didn't think they were virtuous enough to govern themselves. They understood, man, you put the weight of governing myself on me. Wow, I'm not virtuous enough. I find that amazing. That I find it amazing that they thought that of themselves, that maybe we need a little stronger government than they think because we're not. Yes, sir. Yeah. They had been whipped just like little puppies, and freedom was something so new. And even today, I hear that, there are countries around the world, freedom scares them to death because they've been so many generations, they don't know what it's like to go to a grocery store and buy their own food. They don't know what that's like. And kind of an amazing thing. Now, Europe's crowned heads watched us. And they were like, you mean you're going to let the redneck run the place? Yeah, really? And so they just folded their arms and sat back on their thrones and waited for us to go down the toilet because we were putting farmers and bakers and butchers and candlestick makers in positions of authority. But by 1905, America was the richest industrial nation in the world. And these crowned heads in Europe were like, whoa. Something was working, and something was working very well. We had 5% of the Earth's land area. 5%. We had 6% of the Earth's population. That's pretty much a minority, right? Yeah. So, I mean, what's something that tiny going to be able to do other than produce about 1/2 of everything that was made on the planet? 50% of the durable goods and services that were produced at that time were produced here in this country, and we had 6% of the Earth's population. Pretty amazing what freedom can do for people and how it just unleashes them. Yes, ma'am. 1918, well, they'd do the same thing. So our founders learned that the golden key to prosperity, economically and nationally, freedom. In other words, get out of people's way. Don't put so many onerous, restrictive rules and regulations on people that they can't breathe without getting permission from the government. Get out of their way. And they understood that. And when they did, man, we blew up as a country. And at that point, people started rolling into the United States, and they still are, by the way, because as bad as things might be in pockets of the country, people are still willing to risk their lives to come here And I'm welcoming them. Man, come. We got a front door. We got a way to get in here. Honor our system of laws by coming the right way. Don't break into my house. I've got a front door and a back door of my house. Now, you're welcome to come to my house. Don't kick the window in. You're not welcome to do that. And if you come, if I see somebody coming up the sidewalk and they look like they're going to, I've got a little bit of a problem with what they look like, I'm not inviting them into my house. Can we filter people from coming into the country? Did you know that the federal law gives the president the authority to not to establish, but to carry out a religious test for people coming into the country? Did you know that? And a president has the right, the authority to say, you may not come. If you're coming for nefarious purposes, if you're coming with a suspicious background, no, sir, you may not come. It is not a right to be here. It's an honor to be here, and we are the ones that have control of the damper, who we let in or not. All right. Now, here's kind of the heart of the whole thing. Where did they get these principles? There were two brothers by the name of Hengist and Horsa. Hengist means stallion. Horsa means horse. And these were two Anglo-Saxon brothers, and they moved into the British Isles in, now get this, 450 A.D. They came into England, and they introduced to the British Isles an unwritten, this was not written, that turned out to be a weakness later on that they rectified, but for the first many, many decades, it wasn't written down. It was called People's Law. So they brought their People's Law into the British Isles. They said, well, why wasn't it written? Because it was common sense stuff. Why would you write down, don't kill your neighbor? Why would you need to write that down? Have enough common sense not to do that. And so there were just things that they didn't think needed to be written down, but they found out that. And the founders knew by studying, this was one of the things that they studied, People's Law. They came to understand that there were three things that people wanted. And here they are. Number one, freedom. Freedom to follow their dreams, freedom to follow their goals, their passions, their ambitions in life. Freedom to profit. You understand? Liberals think that profit is poison and that you should $1 million a year, ethically, legally, morally, go for it. That's all that you need to do, But you're free to make as much money as you want. And now the French Revolution was all about this. Everybody's got to make the same, live the same way, That was what the French Revolution was about. Well, ability to become. There are some people who never want to be anything other than what. Then there are folks that will work. They will stay up at night, work, just crazy. They will build something. And our former president said, you didn't build that. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. And yes, they roads for their trucks. I understand that. But they were the ones that founded their business. And anyway, these are the two of the three. And then peace. They understood, if you can provide these, this is what the government's supposed to protect right here. Protect my freedom. Don't do that. Peace. Guard our borders. Keep us peace. No form of government existed anywhere in the world like this. Do you find that amazing? But people, like Daniel said a while ago, people down so thoroughly, they didn't care to live any other way. I mean, you're talking about generation after generation after generation of these people had just been almost destroyed emotionally. Now, let me give you the 6 guiding principles of People's Law. This is the essence of what Hengist and Horsa brought into the British Isles. Number one, they were a commonwealth of free men. They got that out of Leviticus 25:10. Number 2, they were organized into small, manageable units with representatives that had a voice and a vote. They got that out. Number 3, they strongly emphasized local self-government. In other words, take care of your problems locally first. If you can't take care of it locally, go to the next step. If you can't take it, you know what I'm saying, the concentric circles, but you don't start out here. You take care of things locally. If your children misbehave, don't call the police. Take care of it. You're a parent, you know, you do that yourself. And so they strongly emphasized local self-government. Number 4, the law is based primarily on reparations to victims, Exodus 21 and 22. Number 5, elected leaders and laws were approved by consent of the people, 2 Samuel. And then number 6, the accused were presumed innocent until found guilty. 450 AD, folks. You were innocent until you were proven guilty. Wow, that's pretty advanced. All right? And so this is sort of the heart. Now, do you see any Americanization of these things? I see all this stuff in our American system of jurisprudence. We didn't make this stuff up in 1787 in Philadelphia. They got this stuff from already existing principles and formed it into a document. All right, now, the world was about to change. The Articles of Confederation. This ain't working. We're going to have to do something different. And so James Madison is the one that suggested a stronger central government. And can you imagine that there were a lot of people in the colonies that didn't like that suggestion? Where did we come from? England. What did they have in England? A really strong central government. And so this kind of brought up some bad memories. No. And so Madison is the one that did that. For over 5,000 years, we had attempted to build permanent civilizations, and they all failed. Where are the Incas? The Minoans? Where are the Aztecs? Where are these people? They're gone. Why? Because they built their systems on people, on the king, on the dictator, and it eventually all eroded because there's no such thing as a benevolent dictator on earth anyway. And so every one of them failed. We study them in our history books. But something very different happened in 1607. Jamestown, Virginia was the first permanent colony on the North American continent. And they did something very radical and very different in Jamestown. All eyes, I'm talking Europe, was watching us like a hawk to see how this thing was going to collapse, basically, is what they were waiting to see. From greatness came greatness. Out of this settlement, one little village, out of one little village, Jamestown, came some pretty famous descendants, came some sons of Jamestown, some of the greatest minds that not only this nation, but the world itself had ever seen. And so here are some of the kids that were sired out of the families in Jamestown. There was a gentleman by the name of Thomas Jefferson. All he did was author the Declaration of Independence. There was a guy named James Madison, who was what we refer to as the father of the Constitution. George Washington, who was the first popularly elected president in the country. George Mason, who was the author of the first American Bill of Rights. He was from Virginia. That's pretty impressive. You know, to be able to say, yeah, guess who came from, you know, we've got, I went to school with Rowdy Gaines up in Winter Haven, and he went to the Olympics in the swimming thing years ago, and now he comments. He's a commentator in the swimming events in the Olympics now. And you go into Winter Haven, there's a big old sign just as you come in from the south. Winter Haven High School, home of Rowdy Gaines. You know, they are so proud of that over there. And so this is pretty impressive, however, to me. Now, King James had oppressed us to the point of desperation. He was passing laws that were very injurious to business here in the country. He wouldn't listen. He was a very proud, arrogant man. And they ruled us with an iron fist. It was at this point that the colonists said, you know, maybe we are virtuous enough. Maybe we can do this. And it was the summer of 1786. It was 10 years after the announcement of the independence. 3 years after the American Revolution, April the 19th, 1775 to September the 3rd, 1783. That's 8 years, 137 days we fought among ourselves. And 25,000 of our people died here in this country. There were 11 deaths per day. We were broke. There were 13 colonies. We didn't have any money. We were starving to death. We were freezing to death. We had no money. And each state was independent of the other. We weren't helping each other. There was no such thing as that. And the Articles of Confederation would work relatively well with this loose arrangement. If you wanted to stay 13 separate colonies for the rest of your life, then the Articles of Confederation might have worked for a little while longer. But that's not what we wanted. We wanted united, not disunited states, United States. And in order for that to happen, something had to change. And that's what happened in the summer of 1787. And so Congress instructed each of these colonies to write a constitution of its own. Y'all come up with a constitution. And here's what happened. John Adams led the way. He wrote a constitution for Massachusetts featuring a balance of the executive, legislative, and judicial branches and dividing the legislative branches into two houses. That was the first time that ever been done in history. It was done in Massachusetts. It ultimately would find its way down into the federal Constitution of 1787 because it worked. What it did, it divided power. So you didn't have all the power located in one person or one committee or one branch of government. It was there was a balance. It was a tripod of government, and so the ideas were starting to flow and to come together here, right, just at the right time, by the way. And the founders knew that freedom and people would thrive, just like you guys know what kind of an environment orchids thrive in, or tangerine trees. You know what to feed them, and you know what environment is best for them. Freedom can be killed. There's a poison environment that will kill freedom. Europe has done this for centuries. The Muslim states have done this for centuries. There is no freedom. Those people are scared to death to live in freedom. We, on the other hand, I'm scared to death to live in socialism. 47% of our millennials, by the way, believe that socialism would be a better form of government. 47%. So, yeah. Freedom and liberty are pretty fundamental elements of human. You know why the United States is exceptional? It's because we're free. We're no different than Europeans genetically. Matter of fact, most of us came probably from European stock. Their topography is not any better. It's beautiful, just like we've got. It's freedom. I'm telling you, give people freedom, and some amazing things will happen on the physical level. Now, can you imagine when people are free spiritually, how that develops even more of just an explosive atmosphere and environment in a nation? And so our government, they understood that we can't provide happiness. We can't do that. Now, we can get out of your way and let you pursue it, but we can't provide it. Government cannot exercise authority over people, and government has not been empowered to grant entitlements to remove requirements for work and production like we have done. There is no requirement to work. For the first time in the last 5 years, for the first time in American history, you can make more money on government entitlements than you can a job making minimum wage. Why would you work? Now, you would, I understand, but there are people in the country that if they can make money off of us without working, why work? I can stay home and watch Oprah all day or play video games. I don't get out and work. And so that's where we're headed. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Adam Smith, who was a Scottish professor of economics, he published a 5-volume set of books called The Wealth of Nations. I don't know if you've ever heard of that set of books or not, but in this is what capitalism is based on. This is where we got it. the wealth of nations. Guess what year this was published? 1787. Isn't that coincidental? As soon as it would boom, well, we've got this thing going on already, and they're looking for an economic system. They're looking for a way to build our financial wealth. Here are some things that Adam Smith said that, oh my word, this is what we're built on. Number one, specialized production. Each person or corporation of persons do what they do best. Get out of the way and let them do it. We've got great artists, and we've got great artisans, and we've got great people that work with their hands. Get out of their way. Let them. They'll build you a nation. They'll do it. And that's exactly what happened here. Number two, the exchange of goods takes place in a free market environment without government intervention in price, wages, or production. That's what Adam Smith said. And so when the government begins to come in and control prices and wages and say to McDonald's, you got to pay these high school seniors $15 an hour to flip hamburgers, that's when you're going to run into trouble, all right? And that's exactly what we're running into right now. Number three, Adam Smith said that free market provides the needs of people on the basis of supply and demand without government-imposed monopolies. Don't do that. And when the government tries to compete with its tax base for products or services, it's going to fail. For instance, if the government would, let's see, and I know this is a wild, it never will ever happen. How about health insurance? Let's just say that the government wants to get in the health insurance business. Who's going to compete with the government? They can't go broke. You can't. And so what's going to happen? Individual companies are going to go out of business. Now, you understand, when your company goes out of business, you can't print more money. Federal government can. Now, it's an inflated, I understand all that. It's going to collapse, but they apparently don't think that far enough ahead. So Mr. Smith went on to say that prices are regulated by competition on the basis of supply and demand. In other words, let's say Jeremy has a widget business and Daniel has a widget business, and let's say you make really bad widgets. Should the government come in and subsidize you so you can stay afloat while you make bad widgets, and Daniel's over here trying to that's the point. That's the point. Now, in reality, Adam Smith was saying Jeremy deserves to go out of business. Don't go in and feel sorry for him and bail him out. Let him go out of business or pick his game up. Yeah, pick your game up or go do something else. Exactly right. All right. Well, are you in the widget business, by the way? Okay, you don't like widgets? All right. Well, Dan, looks like you got the market cornered on widgets. So, all right. Profits are looked upon as a means by which production of goods and services is made worthwhile. Is it okay to make money? If I buy it, we used to own a health food store in Lakeland. You know what we would do? I'll just tell you the dirty little secret. We would buy a bottle of vitamin E for $10. You know how much we'd sell it for? $20. We'd double the price. And we had to make money. We had employees, we had overhead, we had insurance, we had bill, Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, nothing wrong. And that's capitalism. Well, liberals look at profit as wicked, vile, you're taking advantage of people, all this kind of stuff. Well, why do you think people are in business? Betty, why did you guys get in the vegetable business? Did y'all want to make some money? You get in business because this is your dream. This is what you do. This is what you do well. And what is your compensation for that? Profit. Exactly. That's exactly right. Thank y'all. All right. And what you're going to do with that, you're going to want to expand your business. Well, what do you have to do to expand your business? You got to hire somebody else, and build bigger buildings. It just makes sense. And then number 6, competition is looked on as the means by which quality is improved, quantity is increased, and prices are reduced. So he's kind of struggling a little bit. So what might he want to do? He might want to drop his prices. he may want to make better widgets. And so it's going to make him a better businessman if he's got some competition. But you take away the competition, then you can sell any kind of junk you want. And you know what I'm saying? So, all right. Let's run on here. Nowhere in the world were any of these things being practiced, which I find amazing. But by 1787, the world was old in 1787. Nobody was doing this. And so on May the 17th to September the 18th in Philadelphia, the most incredible, unique document was being formulated by these old guys. You know, one of them, Jonathan Dayton, was 26 years old. And here's the beauty of it. You know who the star of the Constitution is? The individual citizen, not the king. We didn't have a king. Not the government. Individual. You are the center of the Constitution, and that's why liberals hate it, because they're not the center of it. You are. Now, what is government? This is probably the most important section of this whole presentation. Are y'all okay on time? Are we good? I'd like to finish this, because there's some really good information. Okay, all right. Government is this. It is a system of ruling or controlling. That's all government is. Now, the founders measured political systems in terms of coercive power or control in which a particular system of government exercises. You understand that we do need control exercised over us in certain areas, right? If you own a restaurant, please, you can't make your hamburgers like that. There's a law against that. You know, these armpit hamburgers, you ain't going to sell many of those. And so I'm glad there are laws that tell us, you know, don't drive 90 miles an hour in an active school zone. Don't do that. And you know there are people that would. And so there has to be a system of control, and understand that. But the yardstick is not political parties. It is not Democrat or Republican. The yardstick is political power. Now, the founders considered two extremes. Extreme number one was anarchy. That's no law at all. Let's just don't do anything. And there are many people in the country that would love to see that. Just no law at all. When I was chaplain of the police department, I was speaking at the junior high several years ago after one of the school shootings, Paducah or Pearl, Mississippi or somewhere. And there was about, 500 or 600 kids in the gym. And I asked, how many of you would like to just see all rules and laws done away with? Oh, my word. Hands went up all over the gym. I said, really? Yeah, just no rules, and they just love that idea. And so I called, you know the kid I'm talking about. You know that kid. Well, I called that kid up to the microphone and said, come here, young man. And he came up there like that and said, so you think we ought to do away with all the rules? Yep, sure do. I said, all right. Well, let's do that momentarily. And what I want you to do is stand real still while I run my pen up your nose. And he said, you ain't running that pen up my nose. And I said, there's no rule against it. There's no law against it. Why can't I do that? Well, you ain't. I said, so you really don't believe that. I said, go sit down. And so he went and sat down. And the point is this. People want laws to protect their stuff. Don't you? You come into my house, we're going to have a problem, but I can go into your house and take what I want to take. And so people really don't believe that. So they looked at this matter of anarchy or no law, and then they looked at tyranny, which was too much law. And so those are the two extremes. Either do what you want to do, or you're not going to be able to do anything you want to do. And so they were looking and said, well, I don't know if we like either one of those. And so we came up with this what they call ruler's law. Now, look at the pyramids. The one on I don't know why that's upside down, on the writing anyway, but the pyramid on the left, that's tyranny. Where is all of the power in that pyramid? At the top, all right? Who's got the least amount of power? Those folks on the bottom. Now, in the left side, that was people's law. And people's law, at the top, there's the least amount of power. All the power is spread out at the bottom. And so the people have authority. We could change the Constitution. That's hard to do it. The founders built in to the Constitution a system whereby it can be amended, but it is a monster to do that. And they were wise enough not to make it easily done. And so this is the deal here. So in either one of these, which would you rather have? All the power at the top or the power at the bottom? I would rather have power at the bottom. So keep that picture in your mind right there. I'm not going to read all this because I just told you all that. Now, here's Israel. At the top, there was a man named Moses. He had a brother named Aaron. There was Joshua and the council of 70. In the middle there were groups of 50, 100, and 1,000. And down at the bottom, there were more than 600,000 families, more than 3 million people with the power to govern themselves. So where was the power to govern Israel? It was in the people. All right? So we, systemically, we are designed like Israel because the power is at the people level, not at the government level, but that's not the way we actually function at this moment, unfortunately. Now, 3 areas on the scale of all: ruler's law, no law, and people's law, or it was known also as Anglo-Saxon law. Under people's law, the amount of government control is determined directly by the consent of us. You can do this, you can't do that. But this thing is turned around. We're scared to death of government. You know, government ought to be scared to death of us. You know, there's more of us. So numerically we're larger, and we actually have the Constitution on our side, folks. But guess what we don't know much about? We don't know much about our freedom. We don't know who we are. We don't know that we are the broad-based bottom of this, but we don't know that. We think that the government is the one that tells us what to do, and so these kids this age right here are not taught this stuff in school. You know, they're taught, they're little wards of the state, you know, and the government will tell them what to learn and all this kind of stuff. So the founders wanted the citizens to be free of this excessive government control, and they found the perfect. However, it was not unanimous, unfortunately. 55 came, not everybody stayed. These guys weren't professional politicians, they were farmers. They had crops to get in and families to raise. And so by September the 17th, only 39 of them remained. 3 of them refused to sign the Constitution. And again, 2 Corinthians 3:17, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty, and the Spirit of the Lord is all over that Constitutional Convention. And we just simply wanted to be free from the British Crown. Now, again, where did they get this stuff? The idea of self-government, where did this come from? Well, kings thought that we were too stupid and uneducated to do this. And so we can thank Thomas Jefferson for introducing the precepts of people's law. He was the guy that did it. He stood up and said, I've got an idea. And so he's the guy that brought these to the table. And so hooray for Thomas Jefferson. I don't agree with everything he did or believed, but I do think he did a great thing here. So there's an amazing connection that the founders read the law of Moses, people's law, and they discovered some incredible similarities. The Reverend Thomas Hooker wrote the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut based on Deuteronomy chapter 1. The Fundamental Orders of Connecticut were this was the first written constitution in modern history. It was adopted in 1639, a long time before the Constitution. And so even at that point, our founders discovered, again, that the key to prosperity, if you want an economic explosion, you want freedom for your people, then give them freedom, put it in writing. All right? And they did. Principal points of people's law. And I've already given you these, and I'm going to run through these real quickly. Number 3 is important. The laws by which we were governed are considered natural laws, which, again, liberals do not believe in natural law. They believe in government law. You remember when Clarence Thomas was being grilled for a Supreme Court nomination a number of years ago? He was very deeply convicted that natural law was a part of the way God designed men to work, and liberals beat him over the head with that, you know, because, no, it's government that's got the right. No, and so he believed that God instilled certain laws into the human species, and that's called natural law. Number 5, primary responsibility for solving problems with the individual, and then it's just like church. You know, you got a problem with Sandy, I go to Sandy. You know, I don't go to Tom and Charlotte, I go to Sandy. And you make it right as broad as you made it wrong. And so that was very much a part of this written law. And they were organized into these small groups. Every adult had a voice, and then they would elect representatives, which is where we got the idea of a representative form of government here in the country. All right. These rights were considered unalienable, which means you can't be divorced from the government, can't take the rights away from you. And without civil retribution, which is kind of funny to me today, that, if the government takes your rights away, or you can surrender them, and we've got that going on right now with the Second Amendment. I've never known a people that want to surrender its rights. It's our right to keep and bear. Keep, that means own. Bear means carry. You know what my carry permit is? The Constitution of the United States of America is my carry permit. But now I have to spend several $100s to get one. I do that, because I don't want to get in trouble. But anyway, number 8, the system of law is based on severe punishment and complete reparation. In other words, when the guy does the shooting, we don't all feel sorry for him. Oh, his daddy never said, I love you. He did wrong. That's the guy that needs to be punished, not everybody else, which is kind of the way, the victim is the one that is the problem in our culture today for whatever reason. And now, Anglo-Saxons considered 4 crimes to be what we would know as federal crimes or crimes against the whole people. You ready for them? Number 1, 4 national crimes. Treason. You didn't do that. I think it's being done on a national level right now. Number 2, cowardice, or refusing to fight or failing to fight courageously. You didn't do that. You didn't throw your gun down and run away. You just didn't do that. Number 3, desertion. You didn't do that. We had a deserter that was invited to the White House a number of years ago. Invited to the White House. And he walked off, and we had soldiers get killed because I think Bergdahl was his name. And then number 4, yeah. See, that's not a sin anymore, it's law. And then we wonder why we're in trouble. God said don't do this, and we say, forget that, we're going to make a law saying you can do that. So these were the 4 national crimes. So people's law was unwritten because the Anglo-Saxons believed these were universal laws given by God. You don't need this stuff written down. But later on they had to write it down because of just culture. The state cannot revoke natural law. God has given certain unalienable rights among these, and there are many, but among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life. Everybody deserves a lifetime. Is abortion constitutional? No. It denies the life of an individual, for goodness sake. Now, how we came up with that's a mystery to me. God gave these rights and others, and the government cannot take them away. So they are constitutionally guaranteed, legally recognized by the founders to be gifts from God that may not be. And this is the big stumbling block for liberals. The Constitution, it's old, it's this, it's that. Yeah, I know what it is. Yeah, I know exactly what it is. It's a wall that keeps you from stealing everything freedom-wise that the people have. And the basic purpose of government is to protect our God-given rights, not supersede them. I am hurrying, I really am. If God can be erased from the public square, and people can be convinced that He does not exist or has no place in public life, then the government becomes the provider of all rights and privileges and therefore can revoke them at will. In other words, what I see going on in American politics and American culture is this. We don't need God, but we do need somebody to take care of us. Now, God, we don't believe He's going to do it. So who's big enough to do it? Government. And so what I'm seeing is a replacement. Government is nothing more today than a replacement for God. And God help us all if that is the replacement they've come up with, which is what it is. America dies when we disconnect ourselves from the God of heaven. And that's what we're doing right now. We're spiraling down just day by day here in the country. Now, let me give you some lessons from history. In 1887, there was a Scottish history professor by the name of Alexander Tyler. He was professor at the University of Edinburgh. And he had this to say about the fall of the Athenian Republic some 2,000 years prior to 1887. And this is going to be a lengthy quote. I don't know if you can see it all, but I'll read it to you. It's absolutely shocking what Alexander Tyler said in 1887. A democracy is always temporary in nature. It cannot It simply cannot exist as a permanent form of government. A democracy will continue to exist up until the time that voters discover that they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority will always vote for the candidates who promise the most benefits from that treasury, with the result that every democracy will finally collapse over loose fiscal policy, which is always followed by a dictatorship. 1887. This guy said that. Yeah. Now, where are we? I'll give you a quick scale here. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations is about 200 years old. Well, I think we're around 242, 243, something like that. And during these 200 years, nations always go through a cycle. I'm talking about the average age of a civilization. And there's a cycle that is historically accurate, and here is that cycle. We go from bondage to spiritual faith. Now, try to think in your mind how this applies here in the country. We were in bondage to the British government. And the thing that broke us away was our faith that God had another way for us to live life. All right, so as we go through this, keep in mind where we are as a country. We go from spiritual faith to great courage. From courage to liberty. We fought a war against the most powerful military in the world, and we won it, by the way. Then from liberty to abundance. By 1905, we were the richest nation on earth, and so we were very abundant. Then from abundance to complacency. Oh, look at us. We'll always have stores full of food. We'll always have our liberties. We have the Constitution. We're America. Complacency to apathy, which is what I see in the millennial generation. They just don't care. They don't care how we got here. They don't know how we got here, basically. And apathy to dependence. Somebody needs to take care of me. Look, I got all these kids. I got to have somebody pay my rent. I got to have a cell phone. And so we start looking for somebody to take care of us. And then dependence back to bondage. That's the cycle. Where do you think we are? I'm telling you, we're close to the bottom. Probably, we're entering into this apathy to dependence. I think that's where we are. So I can't imagine America being a dictatorship, but I think we're going that way. The goal of any government is freedom, okay? But whose freedom? Here's the question. Posterity. You will never know how much it has cost my generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. Mr. John Quincy Adams said that. So here we've been given freedom. And folks, our freedom was a costly thing. See, I've never fought. I've never been shot. I've not gone through that. This has been handed to me. It's been handed to all of us. We have freedom that was not free to acquire. It cost us millions of lives, and I'm willing to fight for that, to keep that. I really am. Now, where do you begin to restore the country? Where do you begin to rebuild, again, the roots of the tree of liberty here? Well, we begin with the American individual, personally. I've got to get myself right before I can expect the city commission to be right, or the county commissioners. You understand? I've got to be the kind of person God wants me to be personally. It can't start corporately. It's got to start on a personal level. The basic institutions, home, church, and school. In the home, you build character. In the church, you build conscience. In the school, that's your curriculum. All of these are to oscillate around the God-given principles of freedom and liberty that our nation is founded on. And we as a nation have got to return to the Bible as our political, social, educational, and civic textbook. We've got to. Now, you don't have to go around quoting the Bible. Well, it says in John, you don't have to do that. I don't have to say, Wanda, the Bible tells me in the book of Deuteronomy, I don't need to kill you. Best thing for me to do is just not kill you. Right? And so you don't have to go around pounding on your Bible. Just live it. You know, become a living translation of the truths of these things. And so the prescription for our national health, Proverbs 29, verse number 18. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Samuel Adams, who was a Christian statesman, said one time, a general dissolution of the principles and manners will more surely overthrow the liberties of America than the whole force of the common enemy. While the people are virtuous, they cannot be subdued. But once they lose their virtue, they will be ready to surrender their liberties to the first external or internal invader, end quote. That's incredibly powerful. Incredibly accurate. It really is. So this is where we are. Kids, I'm glad y'all were in here, and I hope you listened. I hope you learned that your freedom, Tallahassee hasn't given you your freedom. Washington hasn't done that. This is a God gift to us. And I don't want to be the generation that drops the ball. I really don't. And so I'm glad you were here. Thank you so much. I hope you learned something. Hope you were encouraged. And thank you again for planning your week to be here tonight to see this. All right? Y'all ready to go home? We're about 25 minutes later than normal, but I thought this was something that was going to be necessary. And so thank y'all for being here. Let's pray. Lord, we love you. Thank you so much for our country. We don't worship America, but we certainly appreciate it. We're grateful for our freedom. We worship you and you alone. And I pray that you'd help us to be soldiers in this army that fights against the forces of righteousness. Help us to just be dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. Not by being mouthy or rude, but just simply by being Christian. Thank you for those who are here. Bless our families. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.